Susan is your maintenance designee.
So, and it's sufficient for a quorum? Yes. So then, okay. Good evening, all. I am Vice Chair Dale Black Pennington, and I'll be moderating the meeting tonight on behalf of Paul Zonderman, the chair of this task force. The time now is 5:40, and we'll get started with a call to order. Happy Cinco de Mayo to everyone. It's May 5th, and this is our meeting, which was scheduled to start at 5:30. At this point, I will move forward and call attendance and just take a roll call. I'll note that Paul Zonderman is excused. He provided notice that he would not be here tonight. Also, I received an email earlier from Elizabeth Greenberg, who is the comptroller, and she also is excused and indicated that she would not be able to make it. Also, the town supervisor, Jamie Puccioni, has designated her confidential secretary, Susan Polsinelli, to sit in for her today. Welcome, Susan. It's good to see you. And so we'll proceed with the call of the other members of the task force. Ms. Jessica Brennan,
Present.
Jordan Cochan,
Present.
Elena Finnan,
Here.
Jeffrey Relation. I'm sorry, Jeffrey. Marina Franchile sent me a text. She has been trying to join virtually. She was under the belief that this would be a virtual meeting, so we will excuse her presence. She may be on her way. I haven't gotten an update, but we'll excuse her presence at this point. And we do have one citizen member sitting in, so I'll acknowledge your presence. And therefore, the roll to call is completed. At this point, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the April 2022 meeting?
A motion to approve.
Thank you. Anyone second that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so then we'll move. Are there any comments with respect to the minutes? Thank you, Chief Cochan. I reviewed the minutes. They were excellent and accurate, in my opinion. So I will move for an approval of the minutes at this point.
The motion.
Second?
We can second it. We just.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimously approved. So we are now at the fourth point of our meeting agenda, and I will call on you, Chief Cochan, and Jessica Brennan to discuss the subcommittee D. Do I have the members correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll turn the tables over to the two of you.
Thank you. We've structured our discussion tonight for the Group D discussion by highlighting some more key points that we want to dive a little bit deeper into. In the interest of time, we can't go through every single point, but if the group would like to dive into something else, we're flexible, but we structured a discussion around some key points that we thought would be of interest to everyone. We started with 1D. Would the committee like me to read the whole thing or just reference it on their own?
I'm comfortable referencing it on my own, but
I just
is
didn't,
everyone, would you need to have it read, Susan?
No, thank you.
Okay, I'll reference it on my own. And Jeff, do you need it read? Elena?
That's fine.
Okay, you may proceed, Jessica.
okay. So for 1D, we had a discussion regarding that this idea of having civilian input in the recruitment and hiring process. We thought of it as a way to have almost like a pre-interview committee with civilian input, kind of like talking about a civilian advisory committee. So if we ended up with a civilian advisory committee to help with other issues, this committee might also be utilized in the same fashion for the same purpose, with that same kind of clear mission and goal. I don't know if you want to elaborate. on
Yeah,
that.
so I had, whenever we look at things like this, I'm a person that looks for other models. Schenectady currently has a model that they're utilizing, and I don't know how long they've been using it. It wasn't clear to me. I think it's in the past couple of years. So I had reached out to them, and it sounds like the way they set it up or structure it is sort of a 6 to 7 person panel, and they frame it as a community discussion. So they have stakeholders that sit on this panel that come in, and after folks score on the civil service test and have their requirements, the prerequisite requirements to potentially be a candidate to be hired, I believe what they do, and again, I'm getting more clarification on this, is so they have this panel for community discussion, and they have those folks meet in 1 hour increments with each candidate. And then what happens is that panel sort of discusses the candidate amongst themselves and sort of gives their, I don't want to say recommendation, but input then to the chief of police regarding that potential candidate. I don't think that this would be something hard to develop. I think it would be more about finding folks that would be willing to be a part of that process, and that might be the most labor intensive part of it. But I think it's a really good model. I think it's an excellent idea, and I think it's something that we should definitely implement soon. We've been talking about the hiring process as of late. We just recently hired 2 new officers. But as we move towards, once we stabilize staffing and we move towards sort of hopefully more periodic hiring process, and it's not so many officers so quickly, I think that this would be intricate towards building, our police department and our community relations together in that process. So does anybody have any input or questions about that?
I actually do. Would that advisory board be similar, or would it be the same participants that may participate on the, I guess, the way we have it structured or suggested structure, going from Group C for the civilian review or civilian advisory group? Would it be the same group of people, or would this be a separate advisory group?
I think that's interesting. I didn't really consider that point. I don't know. I don't think that, I think there could be pros and cons to both of those things. More pros than cons. I think the only con that comes to mind would be sort of if folks do have a vested interest in a candidate because they've already worked through them through the process, and now they're possibly reviewing certain components of that person's job descriptions or job duties. Would that have a hindrance? And I don't know if that's the correct language, but I don't know. I think it's sort of like clay right now, and we're just talking about that part of it. But again, I think this would be something we could form relatively quickly and implement if we all kind of sat down and really put our minds together to do it. So,
Okay. It sounds to me like this would be something we may want to do, and just have an independent advisory group, as you said, in the panel form that would take on all of that advice, both policy and also
yeah,
hiring.
absolutely. I think it's all sort of part and parcel, right? It's what are we looking for? How are we building the foundational pieces through policy? Let's give some insight into all of those things. I couldn't agree more with you, Del. I really do. I think that, again, I think this is something that if we really got together on, I think we could do this pretty expeditiously. So,
Kind of follows the thread through the whole hiring process and then the implementation of policies. It kind of
Yeah.
well, and I think we could,
comprehensive that way.
and I don't mean to interrupt you, Justin. I think we'd even sort of pilot the idea. I mean, I don't, my understanding of the way Schenectady does it is there's this community conversation, there's input, but that doesn't necessarily preclude the candidate from being hired, depending on what that input is. And if that's the case, then it's something that we may even be able to pilot with a next hire, where we say, are there some community members, even as a part of this, that want to sit in and just have that community conversation and see what that looks like together, and sort of, again, mold that clay into what it is we think would work for Niskuna. So.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Did you guys discuss how many community members and how the community members would be appointed? What the process would be like? Is this something that you're contemplating the board may have to sort of nominate interested community members, or
I think
maybe just adopt community
Yeah,
members that are participating in groups already?
I think it would be more just putting out an email saying, are there volunteers that want to be a part of the process, and seeing what the response is, and then sort of looking at it from there, like all together, to say, what do we think is the best way to go about this? Because there may be a great response, there may not. And that may dictate sort of how we, if we only have 3 people that respond, maybe those are the 3 people, right? But if we have a lot of people, then we would have to look at that.
It would be nice to have diverse
Yes.
lenses on.
Yes.
And is it contemplated that this would be something that would be under the control then of the police chief, of you, of the police department, or would the board be responsible?
Again, I don't think we necessarily answered that question. I think that I don't know that we could go wrong either way, because again, I think we need to be transparent no matter what the mechanism for selecting those members or bringing those members in is. And, like I said, if we get 3 members, I think it would be, if it was through me, let's just say it was through me. I would go to the board, I would go to Councilmember Brennan and say, hey, listen, we only got 3 members of the community that put in for this. How do you think we should structure this? Obviously, all 3 should be on it. Does that make sense? But if we got 100, I think that would be more of an internal conversation about how we would go about that selection process, because that would be difficult, right? I think we would, again, depending on who wants to be a part of it, I think that would determine how we would go about that selection process. And maybe it could be a rotating panel. Maybe it's, hey, these 7 members this time, and then next time we're going to have 7 new members, and sort of work through that.
Okay. I see that Marina Franchard has joined us. Welcome, Marina. Sorry about the mix-up. We are currently we are at section 4 of the agenda, discussing Subcommittee D. And Subcommittee D has proposed or is discussing item 1D. And they have proposed an advisory group made up of citizens that will act or assist and comment upon candidates for appointment to the police department. So that's what we're discussing. If you'd like to comment, please let us know. Okay.
So Dale, just touching on one more point I thought of. So in speaking with Schenectady, again, I'm just going based on their model. What they do is they actually, it's a separate process. And I think that's important, where the community members have that individualized conversation that's not directed by anyone that is in the police department, to be able to have those open conversations.
Yes.
And then the actual oral boards, if you will, if there was an interview process internally, that's a separate mechanism in place. So I just wanted to make sure that we're clear on that. It wouldn't be internally led discussion with community members. It would literally be community members setting up their discussion with those candidates individually. It would obviously be here, but it would be led by community members.
Okay.
So.
And prior to meeting with the candidates, would the community members have discussion with board members and or the police department?
Yeah, so the way it was explained to me by Assistant Chief Whipple in Schenectady, he described it as the parameters are sort of set up. For instance, there are questions that maybe community members might want to ask that are relevant to something that a candidate hasn't even been trained to do yet. right? Like, how would you handle fill in the blank? And so there are sort of suggestive stipulations to say, they haven't been trained as a police officer yet. So just keep that in mind, bearing the questions you're going to ask. Obviously they don't know the policy, they don't know the procedure, they haven't been through the training. So I think that discussion would have to happen in some sort of a form to really get through that. But again, I think I keep going back to the concept of clay. I think we could look at local models like Schenectady's, see what their successes are, see what some of the pitfalls they see that have happened because they've worked through that process, and hopefully learn from their successes or their fallbacks to make a model that works for us. So.
Any questions, comments? Okay, Jessica?
All right. The next point we discussed was 5D. This section's related to how to recruit by advertising, promoting the civil service exam. We were looking at our Facebook page that's getting developed as a mechanism to help the public understand when, where, how the civil service exam works. And also we've been working on expanding our webpage to advertise that, advertise different things going on in the department, different opportunities for education for the public. We talked about SEC a little bit.
We did. We talked about SEC a little bit, and that kind of spilled into sort of that recruitment model as well.
Yeah.
Um,
A lot of these overlapped.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. They had commonalities and similarities. I think the biggest thing is, obviously we can promote the test exam. When it talks about test prep, civil service, just for folks that don't know, put out sort of basic sample questions from a structure standpoint, so folks get an overview of the different components of what the test is going to require. It has always sort of been on the individual to then go seek out prep courses. And that's pretty common in the area. I don't really know of any other agency that does any sort of directed test prep. And that's not to say that we can't do that. But I can be honest with you, I think that there's one particular course, I'm not going to throw out their name because I'm not being suggestive or biased towards their course prep, but there is one test prep course that is out there that if maybe we could work, and I don't know the legality behind it, but sort of promoting that course that folks can use because it's so comprehensive and it's so good, and it would be above and beyond anything we could ever do ourselves. I used it for 2 separate exams. It really is top notch. But from an advertisement standpoint, definitely we're working on the social media aspect of the police department. We're updating our webpage currently, and sort of that recruitment model. I think those things overlap, and we have to build those programs as we work towards filling more positions in the police department with a community police officer, hopefully at some point, that can be more focused on these things. Did anybody have any questions or suggestions about the things that we're discussing with regards to that? I mean, just to further that, when I first came on as the police chief, I'd already reached out, like in my first 2 months, to SEC to say, how do we get a booth, right? How do we get at career days? How do we get sort of into the discussion forum of folks that are going for criminal justice degrees or, are locally based that may have interest in taking the test and becoming a Niskayuna police officer. And those things exist and we can set them up. It's more about having the resources from a staffing standpoint and also a budget standpoint of, you don't want to just show up and have a blank table to recruit at, right? You want to have pamphlets. You want to have sort of updated contracts and benefits packages and all these things to really put out a good product for your agency. And those are things we would also have to work towards, what that model of that looks like for the Niskayuna Police Department.
Marina?
I can hear you.
So it would seem to me that if I were recruiting potential officers, right, one of the things that I would care about is that they understand that there's such a thing as systemic racism they could be the best person on the block, they could have the most progressive politics imaginable. But if they don't understand that racism, for example, is built into our laws, our gerrymandering process, who gets housing, who doesn't, every aspect of American society is imbued with racist policies that unfortunately are also part of some police protocol that's existed up until now. I would want them to understand that, because I don't think, it's just my opinion, that an officer, a potential officer, could be effective if they didn't understand that they were walking into a system that's trying to clean itself up, but that has a historical legacy of abuse in a lot of circumstances. So I think it's really important that people understand, how the police were started in the first place, and how, for example, like Miss Fiona doesn't want to do stuff like that. Miss Fiona really cares about people. Miss Fiona is setting an example of what a wonderful police force in America potentially could look like. And I do mean that sincerely.
Sure.
So that's why I like the Niskayuna Police Force, because I really do feel that the people on the force really care. That's been my experience. The whole time I've lived in Niskayuna, truthfully, before you were here, when Fran Wall was here, I've just been lucky that the people that work for NPD are terrific. But I think it's important still that NPD is part of the bigger carceral situation in America, and that a recruit needs to know that.
So, and I wholeheartedly agree with you that I think there needs to be these conversations had, I think, at different increments in recruitment, interviews, academy-based. I think that it would be hard in the recruitment side to convey that message necessarily. I think that it might be sort of a component of come to Niskayuna because we are going to achieve great things, like you said, and we're going to push the envelope further beyond, the things maybe that you see that are good and bad. We want to portray the good, but I think that what you're describing really needs to be in conjunction with, for instance, the curriculum at the police academy, right? I think that that's where I would find it hard to believe right now in this day and age, Marina, that anyone that was potentially looking to become a police officer didn't understand the things you just said that people are speaking about out loud in general. Not specifically, but in general.
Well, I beg to differ.
You don't think that folks that come into the police department right now haven't seen what has happened with transitioning in police?
I do not, because even in George Floyd's hometown, there are still incidences of abuse. People have cut their teeth on racism in America. Everybody's been exposed to it. Everybody has been exposed to it, and there's no way to get away from it. And like I said, Miss Keenan is terrific, but you can have somebody. I mean, if you go driving, like I went to Glimmerglass, you have no idea how many Confederate flags I saw. Somebody like that might move to Niskayuna. It's a nice place, good school district, and they might want to come and work under you.
Sure.
How do you know that they're not somebody who's going to want to drag somebody in a car, drag them on the ground because they dare to be out in public? You don't know that.
Agreed, but I think those are two different conversations. So the concept of somebody that we're recruiting, not knowing that all the things we spoke about just previously, and what you're saying now is somebody that we would potentially hire not being properly vetted through the processes that we talked about previous, which is possibly instituting a civilian advisory input for review, interview process. We do comprehensive background checks. There is actually now civil service in New York State adopted in previous times, up until I think it was last year, the only civil service actual requirement from a testing standpoint was a physical agility test. Now you also have to pass a psychological evaluation. Now we always did those things. Every good police agency that's worth its salt is going to do those things. However, it is now a requirement that you are approved by a certified psychological evaluator who goes into certain there's all these tests. There's a battery test that they take, and then they put them through an interview process as well. And that's before we even conduct our background checks and then our interview processes as well. So it's not perfect. It's getting better. But I do agree with you that yes, that needs to be addressed on multiple levels to include, I think, specifically inside of that police curriculum in the academy to make sure that the history aspect that you're describing is enforced and talked about so folks do know those things.
I completely understand what you're saying, but I think it's a matter of branding. Since you're talking about social media, since you're talking about the web page, it's about branding. When I was coming up, the cop on the beat was your neighborhood friend. That's how I was brought up. Okay, in Brooklyn, in a basically white neighborhood. That's how I was brought up. But now there's a lot of people that think the opposite. They're polarized in the other direction. And I think that I don't think this is just a thought. It's not a mandate or a recommendation. It's just having a conversation.
Yeah.
I think that the police do have a function in society. And I think that the police department needs to brand itself in such a way where people that don't have trust will regain trust, where people understand that there are police officers that are really good, decent people like you, and other people that are on the force that I haven't met yet. I really think that maybe this is a conversation for something down the road, but I really think that there is a way that officers can work within society to do good. I really firmly believe that, or I wouldn't be here. And people are so polarized right now that it's a real problem. So that's really where I'm coming from. It's a matter of branding.
Absolutely.
Maybe if that's not germane to this particular item on the resolution list.
No, but I think it's absolutely relevant because we're talking about recruiting, right? And when you're talking about recruiting, it is a brand. It's a brand we're building. And we're not a company, but any good company that has a brand, that builds a brand, recognizes all the things you're saying, right? And is very open to having those conversations, is open to sort of being transparent through their processes, right? And opening the doors. And that is what the building steps towards what we're doing now. And I couldn't agree with you more, Marina. I really.
And the very last thing that I want to say is one sentence. I think there's a reason why people want to become officers instead of going to become firefighters. And that's the reason that scares me. Some people that want to become officers want the tie and want the gun, want the authority. So that's just something to think about.
No, absolutely. I hear you.
I just wanted to jump in, going back to 5D, and it sort of ties in with the overall discussion. In terms of a suggestion, the first thought that came to my mind was, have we reached out to the local high school, to our high schools closely situated to us, and also to the local colleges in terms of reaching out to them. And as you said, indicating what test prep would be out there, what civil service exams they need to take, and just reaching out to them using, not just our website, but any other methods.
Yeah. So.
You just jumped ahead to 6D.
Well, I'm looking at 5D.
No,
So-
it's 60.
So,
We're moving along.
so from a standpoint of so I just clarified, has the Niskuna Police Department reached out to the high schools or the local colleges regarding test prep or promoting the civil service exam?
Yes.
The answer to the high schools is obviously no, because you wouldn't be able to take those tests until you're of the appropriate age. And there's also other prerequisites, including college credits. For the colleges, similarly, the answer would be no. Anyone that is in a criminal justice degree program, typically speaking, would have that information through their colleges themselves. But also, again, Schenectady County puts out a lot of that information. Now, does that mean that we can't do that? No, it does not mean that we can't do that, and we will do that. I think that it would be more influential, however, to be at the career days at the local colleges that have criminal justice degree programs to be a name and a face to say, hey, you're already this far into the process, maybe you're a semester and 2 semesters in. That's when the groundwork for recruiting, in my mind, really begins. At the high school level, it's more planting seeds for the future to say, hey, this is what we do, and we'd love to have you. So if you're going to college or you're thinking about doing those things, we would recommend it, and come home and be a part of us, right? But at the college level, that's more, I want to say closing the deal, but it's more closing the deal in terms of recruitment and to get into that sort of diverse college campus to be a part of that. So, but yes, we can, Dale, and we certainly will. Skankey County does a pretty good job, though, of putting it out. I have conversations regularly with folks. For instance, one of the things, we had a Chiefs meeting about a month ago, and one of the things when we talk about recruitment that sort of makes it a little bit more difficult is the fact that there is the civil service component to it. So folks that don't understand, for instance, if I'm a New York City police officer, I cannot just laterally transfer to Schenectady County, right? Even though I have the certifications, even though I've met the requirements, there is a process where it's not a seamless transition. And I think that's something that on the chief level and the civil service level, we need to get better at as well, because that's going to open a whole different diverse group of candidates as well for that active ongoing commitment to recruiting. And those conversations are already being had behind the scenes, again, with other chiefs sort of in Schenectady County about how we can do better with that and work with civil service, maybe to, not lobby for that, but sort of work towards that model.
And to kind of piggyback on what you said, we do have an internship program
We
at
certainly
high
do.
school where the people that are interested in criminal justice are doing ride-alongs with us. And
You're jumping ahead
PBA
now too, because we were going to talk.
What's
about
that?
You're jumping ahead now too, because
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go
No,
ahead.
but the
Go.
PBA does have a scholarship program that we do for students in the high school, so that people that show interest in law enforcement, the PBA does a scholarship for.
And I until you mentioned that right now, I completely forgot about it. So candidates from Niskuna High School submit their resumes, if you will, sort of their grades, and then a letter of intent to the Niskuna PBA. And what is it $500 scholarship? Is it $1,000? I think it might be.
It's 500.
Is it 500? And then when I was in the PBA, because I was PBA president for a while, we all reviewed and discussed those things, and we pick out one of the candidates, and we actually present them with that scholarship at the night that they do those things on, to support those folks that are in our community that want to go and pursue what we do, or just law in general, to kind of help them towards that goal.
Now, I see that you have with 5D, you have a 3 to 6 month estimated implementation timeline. What does that mean?
So the resolution specifically stated to just put now or soon.
Right.
And I think what the attempt when we all discussed this was to sort of get a better estimate in terms of months and when we thought we could do these things. For instance, and we're speaking about 5D, 3 to 6 months when I suggested that was to get our social media up and running, which we're almost there, to get, it says Coffee with a Cop in the outreach. That's about to begin, right, at the farmers markets. And we're going to look to do that more extensively outside of the farmers markets as well. But also, the civil service sort of testing is generally once every 2 years. This year, we're going to have it again, and we just had it last year because we had so few candidates in Schenectady County. So it was sort of a general 3 to 6 months because I anticipated a new test being given, which we could promote, getting our social media up and our town website up more accurately to promote, and then also in conjunction with the farmers markets to talk to the community members as they come up to say, hey, there's a test coming up. If you're ever interested, we'd love to have you.
Okay.
So
then this is an effort that's ongoing, but for this year, close to completion.
I would say we're going to check almost every box that
Okay.
it's mentioning within that recommendation this year. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Jordan and Jessica.
Yeah, I feel like we
Next
kind of
item.
delved into 6D already a little bit. This one's regarding Niski graduates being encouraged to consider serving in the local police department. And I know we mentioned it already. We were talking about career fairs. We were talking about if we could end up at some point with that community resource officer, a high school guidance pamphlet, maybe something more structured that shows the exact steps that you could take along the way to reach that goal. So it's more concrete for a high schooler to see the big picture of what it might look like. We talked about utilizing, again, Schenectady programs that are already in existence. They have an Explorers program for kids 14 to 20 years old if they'd like to explore what being a police officer might look like in different capacities. Maybe even eventually having our own Explorers program if we had a lot of Niskuna children interested. So I don't know if we talked about anything.
No, it was basically those things. I think what we need to do outside of the internship program that we currently have, that we just started again, is I think we need to work towards actually promoting the Explorer program a little bit more. And again, we are not the lead on that. Schenectady County sheriffs do that, but they do it in conjunction with all of the agencies in Schenectady County. And the way I described it to Council Member Brennan was, it's sort of like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or some sort of program for learning about policing, learning about the laws, going out and doing traffic stops, going out and doing ride-alongs, sort of engaging our youth that are showing interest in the profession to do it more. Officer Mara Walter and Sergeant Party were the ones that were sort of our liaisons to that program on and off, depending on if we had the availability to do it on those meeting nights. But it's certainly something that I would like to see us make more robust from our police department for these efforts. So. Did anybody else have any other
Questions, comments?
What's that? It's the same. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Okay. Jessica?
All right. The next point that we were looking to discuss tonight was 12D, which is in regards to pursuing our New York Division of Criminal and Justice Service accreditation. Chief Koch and I discussed that Lexapro it's kind of gearing us there in that direction. It might be like a 2-year process, and we might need to have like a special assignment in order to reach that goal.
Yeah, so I was telling Jess that this is, accreditation is not, they don't just hand these out, right? There's a reason that the process is so cumbersome on agencies to hold themselves to that standard. And so in conjunction with our transition to the Lexapro policy that we're ongoing and working on, I showed some of the members the other night, there's these accreditation standards that are attached to these policies that are going to be evaluated by evaluators through DCGS. They come out and they literally audit you for all of these standards to see not only that you have the policies in place, but that you're following them. They pull membership out and quiz them on things. I mean, it's a very serious process, and you have to have the mechanisms in place to even apply for it. And one of the biggest ones is, well, two of the biggest ones are training, right? Training standards, and also policy standards. So those are things that we're actively working on, but it's going to take time. It is not something that just happens overnight. So it was hard for me to really, the last point that we talked about, Dale, you asked about what a timeline means.
Yeah.
I put a TBD on that because we can list it as soon because those are the two options, now or soon. It's not now, and it's not as soon as I'd like it to be, is the best way I can describe it.
Well, what are we looking at? Are we looking at maybe a 5-year period?
I don't
or
think it's
a
going to take 5.
2-year
I would
period?
think 2 years we should be, if not ready to apply, we should be very close to ready to apply. I would think a 2-year period from today, it is certainly my goal in 2024 to be saying, what are the final steps at the last? I mean, if that was sort of the end of that process, but it may come sooner. If we get more robust staffing and we have the ability, most agencies, even smaller agencies, sort of have someone tasked specifically to this. And we're just not there yet to be able to do that. So that's going to be one of the biggest first steps in terms of working towards it. Outside of the policies we're already doing, we're building towards it, but having someone specifically assigned to it to sort of liaison between the accreditation folks and ourselves to really work towards those things is going to be a big hurdle, I think, for us. So.
Is that part of our staffing goals? Are we looking to get someone to be,
So it's
Um,
not something that we had discussed for this budget cycle.
okay,
I've already spoken with the comptroller Greenwood, about. I contacted our grant coordinator for the town of Niskuna the other day. There is a COPS grant through the DOJ where they can potentially fund up to 75% of a police officer, if you will, for a 3-year period. The town would have to supply the other 25% of whatever that cost was, and then the town would also have to agree to keep that person on for that 4th year. So essentially, you would be getting 3 discounted years, and then you would agree to keep a 4th year. And what I spoke with the grant coordinator about was the fact that I would like to gear, if we can, if we're even eligible to apply for this and get this, I'd really like to gear 2 positions, one of which would be towards that accreditation and one which would be that community officer, to sort of bolster those staffing levels and save money to the town if we can.
thank you. Any other questions, comments? Marina?
I just have a question out of ignorance. Accreditation. Obviously, Michigan Police Force is functioning without accreditation
Yes.
right now. But I don't understand what accreditation means and how it works.
It's a really gold chip standard for policing. It is the top-notch agencies of Schenectady, or excuse me, of New York, strive to get to that standard and then maintain that standard, because what it is you are holding yourself to at or above very strict guidelines that are created by the state to sort of be that exemplary police department, if you will. It's a big deal when agencies apply for it and they get it. It's a big deal. It's something that we've talked about basically my entire career that we would like to have done, but again, it is very resource driven to be able to accomplish it, and it's a lot of work on everyone, because as we talked about the other day, everyone would have to carry their weight. Everyone would be knowing policies even more intricately than they do now. It's sort of very gold standard of policing. So from a policy and a procedure standpoint, and then all of those fail safes in between to make sure that we're doing things exactly the way we say we're going to do them and hold ourselves to that very high standard.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Actually, I have a quick question. Jordan, would accreditation open the door to, I don't know, federal funding and additional state funding? How does it benefit a police, like a small town police department in New York State?
I don't know that it opens up more funding. I think what it does is it further legitimizes the police agency with regards to standards. I think it gives the community a sense of not only are we one of sort of that elite accredited agencies, but that we're holding ourselves to that standard, because for instance, there's an auditing process. I believe it's every 5 years. This isn't just something you get and then it just, oh, you got it. And it kind of, this is something that you're continuously striving to maintain and improve upon. And I think it, from my perspective, not only does it give us a sense of pride to say we're holding ourselves to a high standard, I think it gives the community a sense to say, of legitimacy, right? These are the standards and we're holding ourselves to them. And I think that's really important for the community to see that we want to do that as well. There is nothing that says we have to do this in New York State, which is why, to be honest with you, a lot of agencies don't have the resources to do it. But no, as far as your initial question, Dale, I don't know that it necessarily opens us up to any new funding. I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, I'll turn it back over
Thank
to you,
you.
Jessica.
Yeah, I thought kind of on the same page. I thought it was interesting they put the accreditation piece in with subsection D, which is focused on recruitment and supporting our current staff, because I think it does both those things too. It will make us more likely to have somebody of quality who wants to work in our town, and it would also support people who work here on our unit to feel supported and feel like everything is functioning the way it should be and it's fair and equitable. So I too was like, oh, that's an interesting place to put that.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about in subsection D a lot about recruitment, and another point we wanted to also talk about tonight is the support component. So we were looking at 17D as our next point to discuss. This point talks about supporting our officers after there might be like a crisis, a debriefing, having a debriefing team after an incident and walking through short and long-term consequences that might come out of the incident. And we really focused here on the fact that our department is doing critical debriefings, but utilizing the resources that are already in place, such as like Fire District 1, utilizing Northern Rivers. So this really helps with the fact that somebody who might be impacted by the incident wouldn't be on the debriefing team and trying to debrief coworkers while they themselves were going through, high emotional turmoil possibly. So we kind of were going back and forth about if we really needed an internal team, if that was best.
So just to touch on that, Northern Rivers has been excellent. They have offered their services. We haven't utilized them to this point because we haven't had the need to utilize them at this point for something like this. But in the past, when Jess mentioned District 1 sort of after, I think it's twice we've had a critical incident debrief in my career with anybody that wanted to participate. It was strictly volunteer, but they sort of set up that mechanism through, where was it? It was an outside agency, and I can't remember who it was. Yeah. But I recently spoke with Sheriff Apple from Albany County Sheriff's, and he has a team of folks that they have in-house because they're a bigger agency. And he was willing to sort of partner on something like this. The reason we would set up a team internally would be to reciprocate those services. So we've been talking over the past year about creating a small team of folks that could go get trained. And it was something that we were trying to decide, would we utilize them ourselves? Because one of the biggest things that we struggle with in smaller agencies is whenever there's a critical incident, we're generally all there, right? As Jessica mentioned, but also it's sort of that comfort level to be able to speak to maybe somebody who isn't a part of your agency and that doesn't know you, to be able to really open up from a police perspective. I think that's a difficulty that we all have. And when it's a peer-to-peer, you may not be as comfortable doing that versus someone that maybe is in law enforcement or is in the emergency services field that has similar experiences, but that you're not going to see when you go to the grocery store. So that's kind of the model that we're looking at. But like I said, I'd reached out. I know Schenectady City Police Department has helped us with some different situations as well. They've been great. They have a great program over there. But even that, sometimes it's a little bit too close for some folks to feel comfortable because you're working side by side continuously. So we're going to look at that maybe to do it county by county and sort of trade off services back and forth. So
In the past, has it been done in that manner, in a reciprocal manner? Is that?
So it's a training that some counties, they create like a countywide team and they'll deploy, they'll talk to a sheriff in a different agency who has a critical incident and they'll say, hey, do you need us to send our folks, right? And we'll come down and help. So yes, I've heard of it happening that way. I've also heard of it, as I said, Schenectady Police Department has been great in rendering services to support some of our members in the past as well. So I've seen it both ways.
But we don't have a set formula or policy.
There is
it does say Lexapro.
Yeah, so Lexapro
policy
has a
covers
policy. It does. It has a policy specific to this. And it talks about setting up a critical debrief team, which we are going to be implementing. The question becomes, I think it's going to be a case by case basis how that all sort of shakes out. Because again, there may be times when, again, this is not a mandatory thing. There may be times where folks would rather utilize other services, right? That they feel more comfortable with, because it's really about that person to sort of digest those things.
Okay. But we've marked this item completed. Is that because the Lexapol policy exists,
Yes.
or?
Yes, because it's been implemented, yes. And as far as, and again, when I'm rereading this now, it says after major incidents require debriefings in accordance with
Right.
policies with a purpose. Maybe I misread this. So my takeaway now about this a little bit more is debriefing about the pros and cons of what happened during a critical
Yeah.
incident. But I think because it was grouped in this, it's also the mental health component as well, as the way I'm taking it. So we've been talking about the mental health component from an actual operational standpoint. What were our successes? What were our failures? That is also a part of the policy to come back and talk through those things, and that's been implemented. So
Okay, so in that respect, it's completed, and we have Northern Rivers in place for the counseling component. And additionally, we're considering reciprocal
yes,
um, service connections
Yeah.
that may serve our police officers.
and it's not just Northern Rivers. We mentioned Northern Rivers because they've been so gracious to us. I have a good working relationship with one of their regional coordinators, but we offer an employee assistance program through the town of Niskuna as well that folks can reach out through. I mean, there's several different sort of components to this that can be utilized, and it's actually going to roll over into one of the next things we're probably going to talk about, right?
Okay. I'll turn it over
yeah.
to you, Jessica.
Rolls right into 21D, which really focuses on the mental health emergencies that the police officers have to respond to and internalize sometimes, kind of leaving that crisis and kind of carrying that with them. And how can we help other people? Actually, 21D focuses more on how to help other people. And then like 27D would focus more on officer wellness. So I'll go one at a time. So for 21D, we're looking at what can we do there and now what can the officers do there and now if they're responding to a mental health emergency, and what is best practice for that. So not just dealing with it, but using best practice modalities. So we talked about Northern Rivers for child and adolescent. They have a crisis mobile unit that we have on our website now. Police officers have the ability to print it out right in their police cars to hand it as a hard copy to people if they would like to utilize that, wait with the families if they would like to call mobile crisis, and just kind of be there as support and a community support, a person, kind of bring that humanity to the process. And then we also talked about the Unite Us platform that we're going to be implementing as a town. That'd be another resource for officers to utilize with families. They could pull it up right on their phones. We'll have it online. Again, they could print it out hard copy and feel like right then and there they have resources to hand to family. They don't just say, oh, here are some places you could call, and hopefully they answer the phone. Hopefully they have a clinician available to see you, but it's actually that connection and that real lifetime. So that's what we discussed for 21D.
Okay, and I understand that Unitas would connect people in need of services with a point person who would help them locate the services that they need, or a caseworker.
Yeah, it's kind of like a case manager who would coordinate, or a case coordinator, and also look at the need as the person as a complex person and their system as a complex system. So look at like a multitude of needs, like what would help the whole person, would help the whole family, not just, oh, you're in crisis right now, you have depression, but maybe you're also hungry, or maybe you also need some legal support, or maybe you also need some educational support. So that whole person focus.
And to touch on, Jess just said, we actually just used them today, this afternoon.
Oh.
At 3:00. They came out to an incident for us because a lot of times it's easier while I feel like I'm a good communicator and I can talk to kids, and not every kid wants to talk to me. So it's easier sometimes if they talk to somebody that looks more like Jess. She comes in, they talk to a group, it's a team, and they can work, put together a plan, to deal with situations that occur down the road.
So they
They're
literally,
great resources.
they literally came out.
Mobile
They would
crisis.
call
Northern
the
River,
mobile
Northern
crisis.
Rivers, Northern
Yep.
Rivers did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not United, Northern Rivers, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep, just to
Came
clarify.
out, like, within a half hour.
That's impressive.
It's a good.
Yeah. And they'll go wherever the child is. If a parent calls and says, I'm in a park and my child's out of control, they'll go to the park. If they're on the street, they'll go to the street. They'll go wherever the parent is with the child. So,
So, and also just to touch on that, what's great about and it's not just Niskayuna, Schenectady County has partnered with Northern Rivers. And what's great about that partnership is a lot of folks don't realize, so they also adopted a model, and I don't remember if it was Broward County's model. It was something with a B. So when you call the dispatch center, and let's say that you're potentially in crisis or you have somebody in crisis, they go through a series at a dispatch level of evaluation questions. And depending on how you answer those questions, they may not even dispatch us. They may just dispatch Northern Rivers because that's the most appropriate resource, and they're going to get them there for you rather than the police even being a part of the process, which is pretty awesome because not only does it get the person the resources they need the most directly and quickly, but it also doesn't tie up resources for us to then potentially not be able to respond to the calls that are more appropriate for us. So it's a great partnership and a collaboration.
Wow. Sounds great. Any questions? Marina?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question for Jessica. Jessica, is Northern Rivers the mobile outfit that started in Burn?
I feel like they started out of Albany.
Albany City, I think,
Yeah.
is where they started locally,
Okay, I'm thinking of something
I
else
think.
that didn't go into Albany. I can't think of the name of it.
Okay.
But it sounds like Northern Rivers is following a similar model that Cahoots in Oregon follows, where, and they've been successful for 10 years at least now, where officers are not always dispatched. The dispatcher does know which questions to ask. And it's a gigantic responsibility that the dispatcher has because they don't want to be wrong. You know what I mean? You just don't want to be wrong. So I'm just wondering, Jessica, do you have any idea how that dispatcher is trained, when police intervention might be needed, when it's definitely ruled out? Do you have any idea?
Right now, if someone from Niskayuna called, we would be calling Northern Rivers.
Right.
There's a hotline to call. We wouldn't be calling a
I
dispatcher.
understand that, but how does,
When you call them,
has the dispatcher, right?
so I'll give you a case
No.
example. So
I'm sorry, can I just touch in for
Oh,
a minute? Because
sure.
I
Yep.
think I'm gonna be able to directly answer this. So you're calling our unified communication center. Let's say you're dialing 911 because you're in crisis or somebody around you is in crisis. It's gonna go to our dispatch center. There's literally a question tree, and I forget the exact questions. And if anything is answered yes, it goes to us. If everything is answered no, it's going to Northern Rivers. So it's a finite amount of times that it's going to go straight to Northern Rivers because they are so, out of an abundance of caution, they want to make sure, because we have a duty and obligation. That's why it's so important for us to have a collaboration and a partnership. We need to make sure the Northern Rivers folks are safe too, right? So that's why it's a very specific series of questions, yes or no. It's not a whole lot of in-betweens. And if it's a maybe, they take it as a yes, I believe, is my understanding. So, yeah.
And to add to that, you don't need to access Northern Rivers through a 911 phone call. You can call their mobile crisis unit as a parent, as a guardian, and they will come. They don't call the police. That would be up to me as a parent if I felt like my child needed that immediate safety support, and I also wanted to prevent a hospitalization or have help creating a safety plan, that I would want that clinical team to come as well. So there's two different ways to.
Does the average person know that Northern Rivers exists?
No.
Something we're working on.
Yeah.
So like Chief Coach said, it's on our website now, so that's a huge help.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That could be.
And they've partnered with the school district,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we utilize them as the school district.
Yeah.
Employees as
That
needed.
call that I was on, it was at one of the schools. It was great. I mean, they came out and they are very capable. They'll give you the thumbs up if they're good. Walk out, it's all turned over to them. They have no further, it's a medical call at that point that they're dealing with. It's taking, like you said, frees up resources all the way around. Because otherwise, if you make certain comments, as police officers, we need to make sure you get the mental health care that you need.
Right.
So we would bring you to the hospital, because that's what our default is when someone makes comments that they want to hurt themselves or whatever. If it's a situation where they can talk to someone from Northern Rivers, then they take the situation over, and if they decide they need to go to the hospital, then they can go. So it kind of frees up a lot of resources all the way around.
The way it's been explained to me is the assessment that's going to be done, let's say in Ellis crisis, Northern Rivers is doing real time on the scene to really determine what the correct course of action and safety planning, because the goal is not to take folks to crisis if at all possible. We want to work with them to keep them in the community, make them feel safe, and set up sort of those mechanisms in place for them to be successful in the community.
So an officer can respond and say, would you like to utilize this resource, like to the guardian? Would you like, and pull it up on their phone, pull it up on their, print it out in their police car. This is what it would look like. A whole clinical team will come here and help you. You know what I mean? So it could be it's also community education that way.
I mean, in this situation, the mom was actually there. She arrived.
You have to have parent permission to call. You can't call from a school without parent
And we
permission.
said, hey, listen, this is a resource that we have available. It's better than I'm talking to the two cops that are there. Talk to these people that are more well versed in it. And they chose that option and
Yeah.
turned it over to them.
We've had a lot of success stories with Northern Rivers.
We were talking at the police and public safety meeting earlier. Ellis's inpatient adolescent unit has temporarily closed due to the clinical shortage. So
Which is why we need to promote these things as much as possible to make sure folks, you know, are, I think that's, and this is a whole different conversation where I'm digressing for a minute. I want to get to the point where folks are reaching out well in advance of entering into crisis, where they're reaching out for the resource well in advance when they're getting to that point. I think a lot of folks don't feel comfortable doing that, and that's why we need to promote these things more real time to get that out there. So.
Well, I'm just going to note that we're running over horribly. It's now 6:40. I don't know if we should continue with Subcommittee D at our next meeting. That would be my suggestion. We have a couple other issues, and I see that we're getting, I'm not sure if that's noticed that we have to clear the room. No? Okay.
I think that if you make a recommendation, if you make a motion to continue this at the next meeting, then somebody could second it.
I
Okay.
can say we only had one more quick comment if we want to just close it up.
Okay.
I'd put it
But
kinda
do you
discussion
have
point.
any other items that you?
We just had this one more discussion point, and then like if we wanted to go line by line by line, we felt like that would take hours.
Okay.
So we kind of didn't know time-wise what the committee would like to do. You know what I mean? So we kind of picked things that we thought were good for us to kind of all start thinking about and looking at, that both kind of looked at that recruitment and also retention piece. So we tried to balance it
I'm
with our
willing
time
to-
constraint.
I'm willing to go forward and discuss the last item, and then we'll do a very quick discussion of new items, which would really just be Cobra discussing what the Equity and Justice Task Force, they had some information they wanted to impart to us. And then after that, we can close the meeting unless there are other comments. How does that sound?
That's fine.
Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to continue Group D's discussion at the next meeting. Okay, I'm not getting any feedback, so let's go on.
Yeah, we'll
with
just
the-
finish
with the
up
last
quickly,
item.
just to
Jessica.
kind of, just so we could keep on, I don't know, I just felt like this will help us stay organized. So
Okay.
we just talked a lot about supporting community members who might be needing some mental health support. So our last item was looking at office, how are we supporting our officers who have to, they're exposed to, significant emotional distress. We talked about wellness programs such as EAP, such as the Unitas platform, and Chief Koshin was talking about a grant for an app that he was looking to utilize.
Yes. So there is this, just quickly, it's difficult for folks to pick up the phone and ask for help in general. I think that's fair to say. Most folks don't want to do that because of whether they're embarrassed or they're self-reflecting, or And for police officers, I found in my discussions with police officers over the year, it's very difficult. And so one of the products that is currently being circulated, and I actually got a demo of it and I put out to the membership, is sort of this app-based program that's called Cortico. And it's through Lexipol. It's one of their products that they're pushing out to folks. And it's an app where it encompasses everything. So it's going to have the mental health component. It's going to have the resource-driven component with when we established our chaplaincy program, it would actually have the contacts for all of our chaplains. Any local mental health professionals that we want to put on there, we can put on direct contacts with them. It's also going to encompass things like lifestyle, nutrition, fitness. It has workout videos. It's got meditation. It's got it really, the sky is the limit to what you want to build it towards. And it's all in a singular based app, and it's specific to our agency that we would build it. Now, obviously something like this sounds amazing. And if we had a sort of an unlimited budget to do, it wouldn't even be something I would bat an eye at. However, it does cost money, and I got a quote on it. It's about $5,000 a year. But the folks at Lexipol have been gracious enough. I have pointed them in two different directions locally for foundations that may be willing to support this, and they have talked about actually writing a grant for free for us potentially to sort of pilot the concept of getting grant monies for agencies that would be willing to try this app. So we're working towards that, but I think it's a really great opportunity that I would like to at least try if we can find the grant funding for it and see. They also give you sort of statistics back as far as views and who's not any names or dates or anything like that, but actual analysis to say, yes, it's relevant. Here's what's being utilized by your police officers to sort of understand that component about it as well. So you can make the app better and you can justify maybe funding in the future for it and things of that nature. So I thought it was an interesting thing that I thought maybe something that would be utilized more by folks that might need it, quite frankly. So Cortico, Cordico, and it's through Lexipol. And anybody here that wants, I can send them sort of the brochure and information on it, just so you can take a look at it.
It actually sounds as though it would even prove to be a selling point to
Could be.
attract candidates.
Could be.
You know, who want to come in and want to maintain wellness and wholeness in how they view the, what they're doing.
Well, and again, a part of that recruitment, wellness, something else, I can't say enough good things about the folks at Lexipol. I spoke with one of the representatives and he sent me sort of like 5 different grant ideas, one of which was to possibly fund new gym equipment for the basement. Because that, again, selling points, right? What are we selling? I'm right now reviewing a wellness policy to hopefully put out that would promote on-duty working out 3 times a week, right? And giving folks sort of those de-stressing and also benefits. We want in shape folks, but we also want healthy folks, but we also want mentally healthy folks. And those are all those components of not only recruitment, but good for the town and also good for retention. So.
Okay, I would love to see that brochure.
Certainly.
So I'd request it also. Maybe
I'll send out a group email to everybody.
Send it to the entire
Yeah,
task
absolutely.
force.
Absolutely.
Take a look at it. Jessica, any additional points? Oh, actually, any questions or comments before I no. Okay, Jessica, I'm sorry. Any
No.
additional points?
That's all the discussion points we had planned for tonight.
Okay, thank you. At this time, then, I will move on to item 5, which are new issues and open discussion. I did receive a text from John Lemeling at the Taskforce on Racial Equity and Justice, and he advised me that he did have some talking points. He was unable to make it tonight after all, and Cobra, please excuse me, I don't have your last name. So, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Cobra Cox. I'm from the NISCA Unit Task Force on Racial Equity and Justice. I'm a part of the Public Safety Working Group with John Lemelin. So at this point, we just wanted to thank you, Chief Koshin and Jessica Brennan, for meeting with us last week The meeting was a lengthy meeting that we did not expect to go as long, but it gave us a behind-the-scenes view of some of the processes that we're not familiar with that highlight some of the recommendations. So that was wonderful. It gave us insight, and we were able to kind of fill in some of the blanks of that process for some of these recommendations. So we thank you. We know it was time-consuming, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that and the hard work. We do acknowledge the limitations that you guys are facing. Some of these issues are surrounding budget in regards to the recommendations, and we realize that there are internal limitations and there's processes to take place in order to implement these recommendations. So we just wanted to thank you and highlight your hard work. In regards to where we are at, we are tasked with monitoring your progress, and we are putting together a document in regards to the progress that has been made out from the past year, and able to submit it to the town board. So that's currently the document. John and I touched base earlier today. He has finished the document. It will go to editing, and then that will highlight all of the progress so far. So you will see us be highlighting some of the recommendations, which ones are completed, where they're at, and we'll be able to give them a good general picture of where we're at in regards to meeting some of these recommendation goals.
Before I open it up for questions, will your document be sent to our task force so that we can review and question and maybe suggest modifications?
I
or
don't see why it
additional
wouldn't,
updates?
so I'll definitely connect with John on that and pass that along.
Okay. Any
Right.
other, Marina?
Yeah, I have been, the latest edition of our document, which I think is February 22nd, February 23rd of 2022, I submitted that to John in PDF form. That's the same one that you had
Mm-hmm.
helped me with.
Yes.
And I sent that to him, and he asked me recently if there were any updates, and I told him there hadn't been since.
Okay.
If I can just touch on that too, after our meeting the other night, Cobra, I started putting more notes in.
Okay,
So that I'm going to try to get that done hopefully by no later than the middle of next week, so that maybe it clarifies some of the things that you folks brought up to me.
okay.
I don't want it to hold you folks up though. So if you or John need to contact me directly and we can talk those things through, let me know.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Marina?
I would appreciate it, because I want us to be in lockstep.
Mhm.
In addition to sending it to the.
Of course.
task force, send it to our task force. I will make the necessary changes in the way, if you could just possibly highlight it in yellow or something.
Certainly.
So that I can see what needs to be changed rather than having to prove it line by line. And I make those changes.
Yeah. It was just more, I think there was more explanation that was being wanted to be brought out. And so I can
Absolutely.
do the best I can with putting a couple extra notes already. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Cobra.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cobra. I'll open the floor. Are there any additional topics or matters of discussion that anyone would like to raise? Okay, I see no hands. So at this time, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that your idea of adjourned for today.
Thank you, Marina. Do I have a second? Thank you, Jeff. All in favor? Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was long, though.